On today's episode, we get to talk about Elliotte Friedman and how he was doing his NHL European media tour and how he was able to talk to Martin Necas and Sebastian Aho of their offseason and what they're looking forward to for the upcoming 24-25 season for the Carolina Hurricanes. And more specifically, how can Martin Necas have a bounce back here after talking to Rod Brind'Amour?
You're Locked On Hurricanes, your daily podcast on the Carolina Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to a Monday edition of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you to the Everydayer for making this your first listen of the day. 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, talking everything about your Carolina Hurricanes. I am your host, Zach Martin. I'm the credentialed beat writer of the Carolina Hurricanes over at the Hockey Writers. I also do a weekly Wolves column called Wolves Weekly, which will be debuting more this fall. I am the co-host of the Surgecast, which is a weekly Carolina Hurricanes podcast, along with all my dudes here at Locked On Hurricanes. Got a fun show for you guys on this Monday edition of the pod, as we're going to talk about Martin Necas and why he stayed in Carolina and what he's hoping for after a not so great season in his eyes, and also get to talk about why I think he will have a bounce back season for the Carolina Hurricanes after talking to Rod Brind'Amour and getting that contract extension that saw him get a massive pay raise from what he had in his last deal. And then finally at the end of the show, we get to talk about how Elliotte Friedman did meet with Sebastian Aho, talking about what he did to try to keep Jake Guentzel in Carolina, and also trying to find some new poker mates on the flights, and possibly a rule change that Sebastian would love to see the NHL kind of go back to at some point. But before we get into all of that, now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So like I said, Elliotte Friedman was over there in Europe doing the NHL European tour and stuff like that, going from Warsaw to Prague to Vienna and stuff like that, meeting with a bunch of different players. And luckily he was able to meet with a couple of Carolina Hurricanes. And one of the bigger stories that I feel like is the whole saga that was Martin Necas. And you looked at how the summer went right after the season was over. Kind of rumors started swirling around that the Hurricanes were maybe possibly looking to ship him out because apparently he privately said he probably didn't want to stay in Carolina. His dad came out and said some news, the fact that he did request a trade. You know, Don Waddell made his comment of like, tell his dad I say hi. And going into the draft, there was some movement. There was some talks of maybe the Buffalo Sabres, the Winnipeg Jets might be interested. We all know that on, the first day of the draft, it looked like the Columbus Blue Jackets might have been a big player for Martin Necas that maybe almost included the 4th overall pick, which the Jackets did keep for Keaton Lindstrom. But ultimately, when all was said and done, Martin Necas does come back on that 2-year deal. That's on go from $3 million to $6.5 million per season. And of course, as everyone who's listened to the podcast since April, even during the summer, we know how, just trying to cover all that drama, all the sagas of is he staying, is he going, even writing about it for the Hockey Writers, and just trying to go through the flurry of like questions of what could a deal look like and stuff like that. Luckily, we aren't going to know, and we know that he's going to stay in Carolina for at least 2 more seasons through the 25-26 campaign. And it's going to be a very interesting season for Martin Necas, especially when you're looking at it as a possible transition year where we all know who all the guys that left: Brett Pesce, Brady Shea, Teuvo Teravainen, Steph Nason. So you're kind of looking at to see, who's coming in, what defensive guys coming. Like you bring in Sean Walker, Shane Gostisbehere. Is this possibly the season where Pierre Kochetkov is going to be the 1A in the goalie tandem with him and Frederick Anderson, and kind of passing that baton on to the goaltender of the future, especially after the season he had where he played in 42 games and had a .911 save percentage and a .230, 4 goals against. So it's a lot of question marks and a lot of possible transitions for a team who, all things considered, will make the playoffs, I believe, this upcoming season for their 7th straight appearance. Are they cup favorites? who really knows? It'll definitely be an interesting season for the Carolina Hurricanes. And for Martin Necas, when he was talking to Elliotte Friedman, it was definitely a very interesting one when it came to all of it, especially with all the uncertainty of if he's going to stay or if he's going to go. And Martin Necas said, like, there was one time that no one thought he would be returning to Carolina, of course, as Elliotte Friedman put, Wolfpack country, which on this podcast, we were definitely all about NC State. So it's good to see that Wolfpack country was kind of mentioned there. And from quote Martin Necas, as we said to Elliotte Friedman, I wasn't sure, he admitted. Lots of talking between us and Carolina. It was 50-50. I didn't have the best season, wasn't happy, but we turned the page and we figured out a way to stay for 2 more years. I feel that Carolina is my home. I was drafted there. I played there for 5 seasons. At the end of the day, I'm happy that I'm back and can prove to people that I'm better than I was last season. I'm excited. I'm pumped. And, going back to the possible trade places that Martin Necas might have gone to, he even said that, he avoided some specifics on which teams that talked to him, but he said, I'll be honest, there were lots. And he did confirm that the Columbus Blue Jackets and the Winnipeg Jets were serious about going to get him, and some Hurricanes worked hard to keep him in Carolina. And he said, I love the guys in Carolina, great chemistry off the ice. So you kind of have the idea that that was going to be the thing where the Jackets were very interested. The Jets were very interested. Now, could that have been Rucker McGroarty? Could that have been him and possibly Nikolai Ehlers, or could have been Ehlers and some draft picks for Martin Necas? Because we all know the Hurricanes wanted a star player to come back. And from all likelihood, Rucker McGroarty, who's now a Pittsburgh Penguin, a lot of people view him as a guy who's ready for the NHL right now. So that could have been a future star coming back. But I'm assuming there have probably been a lot more incentives into that deal for the Hurricanes to send Martin Necas to the Winnipeg Jets. And of course, like we saw with how it was possibly working out with the Columbus Blue Jackets, it come in a 4th overall pick and whatever else might have happened there. And, in the end, it didn't really happen. He's staying in Carolina. And honestly, I do like Martin Necas. Like, don't get me wrong. He does have some things that he still has to work on, work on the defense a little bit more, got to watch the drop passes, maybe stop watching the spinoramas when there's 4 guys around him and stuff like that. But overall, he's got stick handling for days. He can basically stick handle in a London phone booth. He's got the speed. We saw what he did, back in the 2022-23 season. He had 28 goals, 43 assists for 71 points, was a career high, was a +5. He did have 5 game-winning goals, 9 power play goals. He averaged over 18 minutes and 25 seconds. And even then, like, his faceoff percentage was really good considering for the fact that he's not really we know he's good internationally as a center, but even in the NHL, he's moderately okay. 45.1%. It's just, 65 giveaways that season compared to 45 takeaways, which overall, looking at this past season, wasn't bad in those categories. But you definitely see the drop off where it goes from like 240 shots to 231, and his shot percentage went from 11.72 seasons ago to 10.4 last year. And even last year, he missed 5 games due to being injured. 24 goals, 29 assists for 53 points, was a -9, 17 minutes and 21 seconds. So you see an over a minute drop. But he did have 23 takeaways, but 52 giveaways. So, yeah, the giveaways dropped a little bit, but didn't have a lot more takeaways. He did up the hit count, though. Went from 57 hits 2 seasons ago to 77. So, did throw the body a little bit more. So, you're kind of seeing that the defense might be becoming a thing for Martin Necas. And you kind of hope that's kind of a trend because, he goes from, 65 back in 2019-20 to 45, 55, 57 2 years ago, then 77 last year. So maybe defenses might be coming into his arsenal a little bit. Maybe with his talks with Rod Brind'Amour, because we know, we'll talk about in the second segment about what he's kind of hoping for next year. He did talk to Rod Brind'Amour, and maybe it's a possibility that maybe some, as a possible thing next year to work on, maybe they throw him in at second line center at some point because they do need a right shot center from what Don Waddell said. Martin Necas does play center internationally for the Czech Republic. And he definitely fits that bill if they can get it to work right. And if his defensive possibilities keep working to where it hopefully should be, that what Rod Brind'Amour wants, who knows? Maybe it could be something they can look at for next season. But overall, I mean, it's good to see him back. Like I said, I really like him, what he can do. Yes, it was a down year last year compared to what it was 2 years ago, where you go from 71 points to 53. But then you look at it, like I said, his minutes, he did have a whole minute less. And I know on paper it's like, well, that's only a minute. Like, that's not really a lot. But if you extrapolate it over an 82-game season, that is a lot, because you're just talking average ice time. There's games where you're taking a lot less or a lot more. And even then, too, like, he played a lot of power play 1 minutes 2 seasons ago, and last year he was on power play 2. And even 2 seasons ago, he did play on the penalty kill for a little bit. And from what I talked with Corey Laviolette a few weeks ago, he did pretty well in the PK, but it's just something that he just didn't do last year. And, maybe he was kind of taken aback for where his role was last year with the Hurricanes compared to 2 seasons ago. And, maybe his conversations with Rod Brind'Amour, maybe we could see a different aspect of how Rod wants to use him. Maybe we see a different style of play that Martin Necas can do, where he might still be able to do it, use his strengths as a player, but maybe also work on what he needs to do to become a better player for Rod Brind'Amour. And I think that's a good possibility for sure. But you could definitely tell that saga was probably just, having a back and forth of, is he staying? Is he going? The guys wanted him to stay. And, we talked about how the Jets and the Jackets were definitely involved in getting him, maybe the Buffalo Sabres at one point too, but it's good to see he's back in Carolina. Like I said, you're going from $3 million to $6.5 million. That's a tall order for a guy who's on another bridge deal after he's just had another bridge deal on this past contract. So now you get 2 more years to really prove that you deserve that 6.5 extrapolated over 4, 5, 6 more seasons. He will be an unrestricted free agent after this contract's over, after the 25-26 season. So it just begs the question, does he stay for the full 2 years, and does he sign an extension next summer? And you just chalk up last year as it was a growing moment for him and the team. So it'll definitely be interesting to see. Now, when we come back, we are going to talk about, what I think will be a bounce back season for Martin Necas, and just his conversation that he had with Elliotte Friedman, talking about his interaction with Rod Brind'Amour. So don't go anywhere, because we will talk about that here in a second on a Monday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. You've heard us talk about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 2nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel at any time. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. Thank you for making Locked On Hurricanes your first listen of the day. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On NHL podcast. Locked On NHL provides you with a national perspective on all things NHL each and every day, with national experts and local insight on every team in the league. Available on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And welcome back to a segment 2 of Locked On Hurricanes, your Carolina Hurricanes team every day. So at the end of segment 1, it kind of talked about how, Martin Necas was staying in Carolina, and how one of the bigger things was the fact that his offseason was talking to Rod Brind'Amour and kind of coming to an understanding of what he wants, what Rod wants, what he wants, and how they want to work together to have a better season for him and for the Carolina Hurricanes. And from what Martin Necas talked to with Elliotte Friedman, he said, I think we'll have to. And this was a question that Elliotte Friedman asked him, because there was some doubt that he and Rod Brind'Amour could find a common ground with different philosophies about style and preference, and if they can make it work. And this is what Martin Necas actually said to him. He says, I think we will, and we have to. It's important for us. I've got to give him something for him to give me, talking about more ice time. I never had a problem with Rod off the ice. We've always been good to each other. I've got to be better. Be a player he can trust. I'm looking for a bigger role. I definitely want to play more, but obviously I've got to show it on the ice, and I already talked with Rod. So you can see that despite the possible rumblings of, him and Rod Brind'Amour didn't get along, or his philosophy differences, or he was disgruntled, and all this other stuff. I mean, yeah, you could talk about it as rumors, but once you hear from the guy himself, maybe it's, just him doing the normal hockey guy thing where it's like, yeah, we're good and all this other stuff, but who really knows behind the scenes. But if you're talking about someone like Martin Necas, who's been with the Hurricanes for a long time, and you're talking about a legend as in Rod Brind'Amour, what he's been doing, since becoming the head coach, I do believe the fact that they had a conversation, and I think there's an understanding of, what Rod is looking for in him. And if he, maybe if Martin Necas can do the certain things and work on his more defensive game as well, maybe there's a chance that he could become a center for the Carolina Hurricanes if his defense picks up. And maybe we will see him on power play 1, or maybe he's back on the PK again, like, Corey Laviolette said. So it'll be very interesting to see how Rod Brind'Amour deploys Martin Necas next season. But I do believe that a bounce back season is in the works for him, especially if you have him back on that second line. And if it's maybe just Barry Kotkaniemi as your second line center, because they did, for the most part, at the start of last season, did play very well together. And even 2 seasons ago, when you're talking about the confidence line of Svechnikov, Kotkaniemi, and Martin Necas, even last year, even 2 seasons ago, those guys did really well together. So maybe if Kotkaniemi has if he keeps that start that he had last year, but take out the whole season, and if Martin Necas plays really well and kind of taps back into what he did 2 seasons ago, then it comes down to who's your left winger. Is it possibly Bradley Nadeau out of camp? Is it a Jack Roslovic, if they slide him up there and they kind of figure out the bottom 6, or they go get someone else out of free agency? Who knows? But I do see a bounce back season for Martin Necas. I still might see him on the power play 2 group, just so that way they can have 2 different guys kind of doing the transition breakouts, with Sebastian Aho on power play 1 and maybe Martin Necas power play 2, or maybe they give that to Martin Necas and let Sebastian Aho kind of fill a different role on the PP1 that still makes that group really, really good. Then maybe he gets more playing time there, and then maybe he gets the power, gets that time on the penalty kill that we saw 2 seasons ago. And maybe we do see a bounce back season, which I do believe Martin Necas will. I think he will have a bounce back season. Yeah, I mean, he still scored 24 goals. Did have a drop in his assists from 43 to 29. Did have a drop back where you're looking at an 18-point difference. So you're kind of hoping that he makes a strong comeback. And I do see him, coming back next season and maybe scoring 65 points, which would be, a 12-point jump, which is very, very possible in my opinion. I do believe that even if you give him an extra minute of ice time and, he doesn't get hurt and miss 5 or 6 games, I do believe if you look at Martin Necas, what he can actually do, because he's got the speed, he's got the stick handling, works on the defense a little bit, maybe doesn't do the giveaways at the blue line and try to get too fancy with it. And also not being scared to shoot the puck, because it seemed like last year he was trying to find the perfect pass and wasn't really shoot first that he was 2 seasons ago. If he goes back to his shoot first mentality, then I believe he has a really legitimate shot of getting back to where he was 2 seasons ago. And that's why I believe that you will see a 12-point jump back in his point total, where he could have hit 65. I do believe he hit 65 points. And if you get 65 points out of a $6.5 million guy like Martin Necas, I could totally see us a year from now talking about a contract extension for him that could be 5 or 6 more seasons. Because right now he's right now 25 years old. He's going to turn 26 possibly next January on the 15th. So he's going to be 26 when this season's over. Then you're possibly looking at him being at 26, getting a 5-6 year extension will take him to 31, 32. Not a bad deal, all things considered. So, yeah, if he has that bounce back season where you're back up to at least 65 points, I wouldn't be upset with a 5 or 6 year contract extension for Martin Necas. And just seeing that, whatever his talk with Rod Brind'Amour was and how Brind'Amour deploys him this upcoming season and just who his line mates are, and just getting the possibility on the special teams of power play, maybe penalty kill and stuff like that. I could definitely see a season where it's like, okay, Martin Necas is back. Let's lock him up for a few more seasons and we're good to go. And maybe he's another guy who might play his whole career in Carolina. Who really knows? But like I said, I've really liked him even 2 seasons, even before his his pop-off season that was a couple of years ago. I thought he was a really good player. I know, a lot of people are kind of questioning, is he going to be good? And you're talking about a guy who is really young. I mean, coming into, he was 23 back in the 21-22 season, where he had 40 points. You're kind of wondering, okay, is this guy going to be good? What can he do? And at that point, he only played like 16 minutes and 11 seconds. But then you see a 2-minute jump 2 seasons ago, and you see him absolutely just scorch earth everyone and lead the team in points with 71. So it's maybe, if they go back to, trusting him more, being back in the certain areas that he was, when he had 71 points and led the team, then I do believe, okay, then last year was just a weird year for him in the Hurricanes. We're all good. We're past it. And now he's back. And like I said, there's an extension in the works that could see him staying here for longer. So, because it's one of those things where, yeah, it's very, very possible that he, he's able to sign an extension July 1st of next year, just like how they did it with Jacob Slavin. So if he does have a bounce back season, which, like I said, I do believe he will have one, because he is capable of putting points up. It's just, is he going to be deployed right, and can he do the things that he needs to do to get the ice on the Rod Brennamore that he wants by doing what Rod Brennamore asks of him? I could definitely see an extension in the works for sure. So let me know in the comments below if you're on the YouTube side of things. Do you see him getting 65 points, or do you see him getting more? And, if he does have a bounce back season where he proves that he's a $6.5 million player, and we kind of get a resemblance of what his 71 point total was 2 seasons ago, would you give him a contract extension? So yeah, in the comments, let me know. Do you see him getting an extension next year if he has a bounce back season? And how many points do you think Martin Necas will have for the Carolina Hurricanes in the 2024-25 season? But make sure to stick around, guys, because we are going to go to our segment 3, where Elliotte Friedman did talk to Sebastian Aho and got a very interesting coffee consumption total from Sebastian Aho and all the offseason stuff that he did with Jake Gensel. Some rules changes that he hopes would happen if he was ever in charge, and all that good stuff. So make sure to stick around, as we are going to talk about that here in a second on a Monday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether in the speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. Well, the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring them huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Welcome back to segment 3 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. So like I said at the end of segment 2, Elliotte Friedman did meet up with Sebastian Aho and asked him what he did this offseason and trying to get Jake Gensel to stay in Carolina. Hopefully trying to figure out some new poker players to be on the team playing when it comes to playing cards. And the amount of coffee he drinks was just on a game days. Learning that was absolutely wild. I think everyone will be shocked by the number of coffees he drinks, especially when it's just straight up black coffee. And, a possible rule change that he would love to see if he was in charge of the NHL. And honestly, we're going to have to do this right out of the way, because it's got to be the coffee thing, because this was kind of like the more of like, oh my gosh, how are you okay? And Elliotte Friedman says that Sebastian Aho is the Carolina coffee king. And the fact that with a minimum of just 2 coffees per day, just black. But on a normal game day, he's probably up to 4 cups. But he did admit on a few occasions where he had, get this, 6 to 8 cups of black coffee a day. And Elliotte Friedman said, really? Sebastian goes, yeah, that's too much. Let's say 4. He says that he did love a certain Finnish brand, but he says he's no snob and will drink Starbucks. And I'm just shocked that, I like coffee myself. I might drink 1 or 2, but it's, certain flavors and stuff like that. I'm not just a black coffee drinker. That's just never been my case. But for the fact that he, on Possibly on game days, he drinks 6 to maybe 8 on certain occasions, but he does drink 4 black coffees a day. I mean, hey, man, whatever gets you through a game, but I just could not imagine drinking that much coffee, especially straight black. But it's just funny. He's like, yeah, that sounds a lot. Let's just say 4 to be on the safe side. But it's just funny how Elliotte Friedman's like, hey, man, that's a lot of coffee. But I'm interested to see what Finnish brand that he really does like the most. But it's good to see that he's like, yeah, I drink a bunch of black coffee, but I'm no snob when it comes to it. So it's just, you kind of see a little bit more out of Sebastian Aho in terms of his personality. It's like, yeah, I love coffee, but I'm not going to turn my nose up to Starbucks or something like that. So it's very, very interesting how that kind of played out. But also the other things he did this offseason, he called Jay Gensel and tried to see if, try to get him to convince him to stay in Carolina. Obviously it didn't work out because the Hurricanes didn't supposedly matched his asking price on the Thursday before the draft. Come to find out that Sunday, the Hurricanes did turn to the Tampa Bay Lightning for a third-round pick, and he signed with the Lightning for 7 years at $9 million. And Aho said, that one obviously stung, but you've got to be happy for him to get that kind of deal. I still think we have a lot of good things going on with our team. So, yeah, it does stink that it didn't really work out. He tried his best, but unfortunately, it just was one of those things where Jay Gensel thought it would be a better opportunity to go somewhere else. And, at least, Sebastian Aho is still happy with where the team's going in. And, of course, the Hurricanes aren't done. Of course, they still got the Seth Jarvis deal to take care of. And, there might be some tinkering through the regular season, maybe some off-season things. We don't know what's going to happen yet. But real quick, though, with the Seth Jarvis thing, Elliotte Friedman did say, I have a theory that Carolina's extension with Jarvis is not far from done. Possibly delayed because GM Eric Tulsky continues to tinker. And I said this on social media. They're not saying it's far off. They're getting close. And you have to look at it from the perspective that me and Corey Lavalette talked about a few weeks ago on the podcast. And I've said this multiple times on different shows or even in written articles. He's an RFA. It takes longer to get these type of deals done. And we also talked about too that Seth Jarvis wants a certain contract done. The Hurricanes want a certain contract done. We all know he wants to stay in Carolina. It's just, what type of deal is it? Is it a bridge deal that he's betting on himself? Is he going to sign a bridge deal that he's going to wait until you see that cap jump up in the next 3 or 4 seasons? Or is it where would he be okay with signing a massive contract now and locking himself up for the next 8 years? But it's also, the Hurricanes have to look at it too. If they want to give him enough money to be happy, but also to be able to pivot if something happens during the season, and they got to make sure they have enough cap space to make moves done if need be. So it's not just they don't want to sign him. It's just they're trying to figure out what's a good number and a good term for the player and the team to give them the flexibility to still be able to run during the season if something happens, and what works for the player himself. So talking more at Seth Jarvis, they were talking about, the playing poker game, how, Brett Pesce's, no longer with the team, and the other guys that are part of their poker squad is Jesper Fast and Jordan Stahl. And they did talk about Seth Jarvis, who could possibly be a fourth potentially. But it's funny because, Elliotte Friedman did ask Sebastian Aho about his, close bond with Seth Jarvis, who a lot of people think that Aho is a really quiet guy and Seth Jarvis is just more of an outgoing personality. So you would think it's more of a opposites attract. But Aho has said he's way out there, no filter, but it's natural. That's why we love him. When cameras are not there, I'm a little more in that direction as he is, but he's way out there. You spend a day with him, you see this guy's nuts, but in a good way, not rude or anything. Nice guy. So that's really funny when you look at it and how just that it's one of those things that we're all kind of thought of. It's like, okay, you hear like, oh, the Finns are really funny. They're really more, when it's just the guys are more outgoing and more fun. So it's interesting to see where when the camera's there, I'm more quiet on Sebastian Aho's side, but when it's just the guys, he's more of a jokester, more of like someone that's like a Seth Jarvis, where Seth is just Seth, whether there's cameras there or not. But if there's no cameras, that Aho kind of leans towards to where Seth Jarvis is, but he's not where Seth Jarvis is at, because just seeing how Jarvis is on camera just probably a top 5 personality in the NHL, and you just know that everyone's going to start liking this guy a lot more when he gets, more recognition for what he's done in Carolina. So it's just kind of fun to see how that works out. So one quick thing before we go to the last topic of Sebastian Aho, Elliotte Friedman did mention one under-the-radar Carolina move this offseason. That was Darren York getting his promotion to associate GM, which basically embedded him everywhere in the organization, from drafting to developing to running their AHL operation to major decision-making. Carolina's challenging dance with the Chicago Wolves is no easy portfolio, and several AHL executives said Aaron Schwartz did a marvelous job with it last year. York has a big voice now. So it's really cool to see the fact that Elliotte Friedman did still talk about for that. Yeah, Darren York, in a massive move by the Hurricanes, made him the associate general manager, but also the GM of the Chicago Wolves. So it's really awesome to see that even, the front office and guys like Darren York are still getting their roses from national media, especially from someone like Elliotte Friedman, which is really, really huge. So one of the last things that Friedman did talk about in his written 32 thoughts was, asking the players if there was one thing they would change in the NHL, what would it be? And of course, some guys were talking about getting rid of the shootouts. Some guys are like Pasternak is saying the game-winning goal in the shootout should count towards the scorer's individual total, like they do in Europe, instead of just being, okay, they won a shootout, but he doesn't get the goal for it. David Pasternak thinks that the guy should get the game-winning shootout goal to his goal total, which I believe is really good. I love that rule, actually, because if you get the game-winning goal in a shootout, I think they should count to your goal total, like if you scored it in overtime. So I do love that rule for sure. But this one's really, really cool from the fact that this is also from Nito Niederreiter and Sebastian Aho, both combined for this one. And, of course, everyone in Carolina still loves Nino. Wish he was still there. I wish he was still there, too. I love Nito Niederreiter myself. But Nino and Aho both said they wanted a return to the 1-1-8 playoff seeding in each conference. And I could not agree with more with that. I miss the 1-8. Yeah, you might have some really good teams that might get bounced in the first round. In that instance, too, when you're looking at maybe 4 first 5, maybe 3, when you're looking maybe 3 first 6. So who really knows? But I miss because I know what they want to try to make more of let's do interdivisional rivalries in the playoffs. Yeah, that's fun and all, but that's a lot of manufactured. We miss the years where it's like you see a team like, the Anaheim Mighty Ducks shocking the world and being the Detroit Red Wings, or the LA Kings shocking the world and being the, Colorado Avalanche, or just whoever you can think of. That's just the one thing that the 1-8 I really miss is you see those underdog teams kind of surprise the powerhouses, and they might get bounced down. That's more of the drama of, oh my gosh, an 8 seed made it farther. Like, the Edmonton Oilers, when they played the Carolina Hurricanes, they were an 8 seed, made it to the Cup final. The LA Kings, when they won their cups, they were a lower seeded team and they still made it too. And that's one rule that Aho and Nino said I would love to come back. I would love to see them go back to the 1-8 format. The divisional thing is just, it makes no sense because you have matchups like the Rangers and the Hurricanes. That should never have been a situation where, like, okay, here's your second round matchup. And it's a division final before you get to the Eastern Conference final. That could have been a game if they were 1-2. They would have met in the Eastern Conference final, and the Hurricanes would have faced the 7th overall team in the East, and the Rangers would have had the 8th seed, and they would have kept finding their way to make it to the Eastern Conference final. But instead, you get them in the second round, and then it's Florida and the Rangers. Or it could have worked out that way too. Maybe the Panthers still make it to the Eastern Conference final as a 3 seed, rather than it's just the division things makes no sense because you still get the same teams every year, but it's like, okay, you're still getting the same teams facing off each year, and there's your rivalry that you wanted, but it's not. It's just not natural, and it's like you're missing a lot of what the 1-8 meant. And I definitely think that's a rule that should definitely come back for sure. But I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments too of that. Would you love to see the 1-8 playoff format come back as well, or are you okay with how it is now with the top 3 teams in the divisions make it, and whoever has the number 1 or number 2 seed out of those guys for the division, who leads the divisions, play the wild card team? So let me know what you think about that. So in the comments, let me know about Martin Necas, how many points he might get Do you see him getting a contract extension? And how do you feel about maybe if you were able to, would you bring back the 1 through 8 playoff system? But thank you to the everydayers for making Locked On Hurricanes your first listen today. Now go and check out Locked On NHL podcast, where the season never ends, providing national expertise with a local perspective. You can find the link to Locked On NHL podcast in the description, so you don't need to search. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. That will wrap up a Monday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Thank you, everyone, like I said, to making this your first listen. I hope everyone enjoyed the show. If you want to follow me, you can follow me on the social medias, especially X at OneTrueZach. The podcast is LO_Hurricanes. Click the link tree in my bio, where you can find all of my articles at the Hockey Writers. You can also find where to check out my other podcasts, the Searchcast, on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. And for this podcast, YouTube, you can go check it out, where you can subscribe, hit the thumbs up button, let me know if you like the show. Also to click the bell notifications so you don't miss a show. Make sure to share with all your friends so they become everydayers just like you, because we are over 940 subscribers. And if we get to 1,000, I might just do something special for you guys. And also to make sure to leave a 5-star rating or review, so that way if you do that on the podcast side of things, I might just read it on the show. But I hope everyone enjoyed a Monday episode of Locked On Hurricanes. Hope everyone enjoys their Monday. And until next time, as always, let's go Canes.